On the Pfaff Creative 3.0 sewing machine, you can select stitches and settings, and you can even change them while you're actually sewing them on your fabric. So I'm going to just give you a quick little overview how to find your stitches, how to select them, how to manipulate them, and just give you kind of a quick overview of how to do it. So when you turn your machine on, you'll come just to a straight stitch. It does always tell you what foot you should use and whether the IDT system should be engaged or not. This here is your stitch menu. So anytime you want to go to another stitch, start by touching the stitch menu. Kind of looks like a little book with lines in it. If you want to see all the groupings, touch down here in this nice long area, and they're identified by a title. So each of these different groups relates to some of the stitches that you see up here on the top part of your machine. And I always suggest that you take some time to stitch out all these stitches. I know it seems like a lot, but you'll love what you have when you're done. Just a little row of each stitch. So as you go along, so for example, group 4 are the decorative stitches, and then there's 4, 1, 4, 2. And then after you get in, you can even use these arrows to kind of go along the different groupings here. And you'll find that you'll just keep going and going. And it will even, so this is almost like going through your machine one page at a time. Now, as soon as you actually select a stitch, so for example, if we select these little hearts, then they show up in the stitch area. That's where you get to where you can see, say, example, though, how wide it is, the length of the total repeat of the stitch. So this is 16 millimeters long. And then this one's tension. Now, if you ever forget what something is, I love the little question mark or help area. And if you see the little question mark come up, then touch something on your screen and it will tell you what it is. So if you don't even know what to call it or look it up in your manual with, just go ahead and touch the question mark. It also can give you a definition for a stitch. So let's go back to some of what I call utility stitches. Some of these stitches, they don't look, I mean, there's a lot of them. They all look the same. Or where in the world would I use them? Touch the question mark and then touch one of the stitches. That one, for example, is an overlock stitch, seam and overcast stretch fabrics in one step. Touch the little check box when you're done viewing that. Touch the question mark again, and you can find what some of these other stitches are. So I love the definitions of stitches. That kind of helps you go, oh yeah, that kind of looks like something that stitch would do. Even over here in the buttonholes, like you have so many different buttonholes. Again, why would I need so many? Well, maybe this one is a rounded buttonhole for lighter garments or jackets. So those are such a great little place if you're unsure how to get stitches selected. So let's just go back. We'll go back to just a basic straight stitch, for example. Stitch length is about 2.5, so it's a nice medium weight, or length, I should say. So as we sew, if we want to change it, notice that when I start to change settings, they turn yellow. Yellow numbers mean that it's not the default setting anymore. White numbers is the default. So as I stitch, I can change this all the way until it doesn't let me go any further. That's a nice long stitch at 6 millimeters long. Now here's another way to get back to like normal settings, is just come back, reselect the same stitch. So if you pick stitch number 1, notice that it goes back to all white numbers, the default numbers. So instead of having to touch, touch, touch until you finally find a white number, just go back to the main menu, reselect the same stitch, and everything will be cleared out. You can also pick another stitch and then come back to that original stitch. That would also clear it off. And I have seen students just turn their machine off, and that will also clear out your stitch. Now, have no fear if you do want to save the settings. You do have a way to save them into your favorites area, and then you always have those stitches saved at those fabulous settings that you've dialed in perfectly, and you don't have to remember what those are. But that's another video. All right, so let's just, for fun, let's pick a zigzag. And then you can notice that just by stitching, and now we can adjust the stitch width wider. And look, actual size right here on your screen. Did you know that? this is exactly what you will get on your fabric. So if you see it really, if you're a very visual person, you'll love this, because now all of a sudden you're going to notice, here I'll put it right up on beside the screen here. Look, it's exactly the same size as what you see on your fabric. So what you see is what you get. Just note, you can make changes for needle position, stitch width, and stitch length while the machine is actually working. Now here is, I did mention needle position, so let's just go back to straight stitch. Right here is needle position. You have a ton of needle positions. I love the Pfaff because I can totally dial in exactly the exact location of the stitch that I want to, and where I want it to actually go. So try out different settings for all the different stitches, and don't forget, stitch out all your decorative stitches so you really know what the stitches look like versus what just the little picture shows on the top of your machine.